My name is Finn Gallagher. I am 32 years old, a community lecturer and social activist in Boulder, Colorado, a town nestled at the foot of the Rocky Mountains where pine-shaded paths open into meadows bathed in golden sunsets. Boulder's not just my home. It is the place where every memory, both beautiful and cruel, remains etched into me like paint on a canvas or a blade hidden behind velvet. This is the story of my family, of the grand mansion on a southern hill where I grew up, and of the secrets that unraveled, tearing apart the flawless facade my mother worked so hard to preserve. As a child, I believed my family was perfect. Our mansion stood tall among oak trees, with gardens of roses my mother tended with meticulous pride. To outsiders, it looked like paradise: sparkling windows, grand dinner parties, guests dressed in silk gowns and black suits, laughter rolling through rooms as my father raised a glass to toast his latest triumph. He was Patrick Gallagher, a celebrated entrepreneur who built one of Colorado's most renowned biotechnology companies. He was busy off and away, but when present, he was gentle, showing me constellations in the night sky, or teaching how a seed could grow into a mighty oak. My mother, Denise, was radiant and sharp. She glided through parties in flawless gowns, her golden hair styled perfectly, her smile captivating enough to charm anyone. Yet the woman who dazzled the world was not the woman at home. Behind closed doors, her words could cut deeper than any blade, and I, a sensitive boy, often felt them pierce. Only one person in that house gave me true safety: my grandmother, Lucille. After my grandfather died, she moved in when I was 11. Petite, with silver hair and kind brown eyes, she spoke sparingly, but each word carried wisdom. She sat by the window knitting or reading, and when I played outside, she watched with a smile that gave me strength. But my mother never showed her kindness. Sarcasm, insults, and cold indifference became her weapons. More than once I heard her spit "useless old woman" when she thought no one was listening. Each time it broke something inside me. The mansion glistened with wealth, yet its atmosphere chilled like stone. My mother's parties weren't about family, but about power and connections. My father, though loving, drifted further into work, away on trips that blurred into long absences. He returned gaunter, more tired, each time his heart condition weighing on him. When he was home, my mother suddenly shifted into sweetness, treating my grandmother kindly as though nothing were wrong. But I was not naive. I saw the facade. My grandmother did too, but she endured in silence, carrying the weight of peace on her frail shoulders. I remember one autumn afternoon when I was 13. I stood outside the kitchen door as my mother's voice thundered, "Who do you think you are to tell me how to raise Finn? You are nothing but a burden." My grandmother's sigh was soft, her hands trembling as she washed dishes to mask her pain. I longed to defend her, to scream that she was wrong, but fear held me frozen. These scenes repeated themselves endlessly until I realized our family wasn't a portrait, but a play, and my mother was its director. The cracks widened as my father's health faltered. He told me once in the garden that his heart was like an old clock that sometimes rattles. He smiled as he said it, but the sadness in his eyes betrayed him. My grandmother worried constantly, brewing tea for him, urging him to rest, but he only promised he had to keep working for Finn and this family. My mother, however, pressed him about making a will. I often overheard her insist in a sweet but firm tone, "Patrick, you don't want Finn to suffer. Secure the assets." He always relented, weary and gentle. I did not yet understand, but the tension was clear. Julieta, our housekeeper, was another quiet light in the cold halls. A Mexican woman with a red scarf tied in her hair, she baked cookies, told me stories of lantern festivals, and treated my grandmother with dignity. Once she told me, "Finn, you're a good boy. Don't let your heart be hurt by things that don't deserve it." At the time, I didn't understand, but her words lingered like prophecy. The years blended into a strange rhythm, mornings of fresh bread and birdsong, nights of muffled sobs from my grandmother's room. The facade endured, but deep inside, I knew something was coming, a single blow that would shatter it all. I never imagined it would arrive so soon. At 15 on a cold October morning, the news tore through me like a storm. My father was dead, a sudden heart attack snuffing out the man who had been my anchor. That moment was not just the end of his life. It was the beginning of the collapse of everything my mother had built. The day of my father's death is still etched into me like ice. I was in history class when the principal walked in her face grave. "Finn, you need to go home now," she said softly, and my heart sank before I even knew why. At the mansion, flashing ambulance lights painted the rain-soaked walls. My mother stood in the hallway, pale and dry-eyed, her voice flat as stone when she said, "Your father is gone." My grandmother trembled in the corner, clutching her handkerchief. I stumbled into my father's study, where paramedics packed away their equipment. He lay motionless on the floor, his face serene as though sleeping. I took his cold hand, whispered for him not to leave, but silence was my only answer. My grandmother placed her hand on my shoulder, whispering through tears that she had always feared this day. Together, we sat in the quiet as rain tapped against the windows, the world collapsing around us. His funeral 3 days later was grand, almost theatrical, filled with polished cars, government officials, and business associates. My mother, draped in elegant black, accepted condolences, gracefully hugging me in front of everyone and whispering, "You must be strong, Finn." Yet she never shed a tear, and her embrace felt rehearsed. My grandmother, too weak to stand, sat quietly in a corner, her eyes swollen from crying. When I asked why Dad left us, she whispered, "His heart was too tired. I only wish I could have forced him to rest." Her grief pierced me deeper than my mother's coldness ever had. After the funeral, the mansion grew colder. My mother, freed from her role as a doting wife, no longer hid her true nature. Her cruelty toward my grandmother became open, her authority sharp and absolute. I once heard her say loudly, "How long does this old woman plan to stay here?" My grandmother endured in silence, but I felt rage building in me. I was only 15, powerless against my mother's dominance. Only Giulietta, the housekeeper, offered me warmth. She still baked cookies, and one evening quietly told me, "Keep your heart strong. You'll need it more than ever." Her words frightened me as though she sensed a storm ahead. My mother became obsessed with my father's will. She told me often, "Your father left everything to us. You'll have a bright future." But the certainty in her voice felt forced, as though she were trying to convince herself. My grandmother, while clearing the table one evening, clasped my hand and whispered, "Be careful, Finn. Not everything is as it seems." Those words echoed like a warning bell. 2 months after the funeral, the facade shattered completely when my mother brought a man into our home. His name was Reed Donovan, younger than her, with slick blonde hair and a smug smile. He acted like the mansion belonged to him, sitting in my father's chair, sipping from his crystal glasses. My mother called him a family friend, but the infatuation in her eyes told another story. My grandmother, unable to bear it, finally spoke. "Denise Patrick has just passed. How can you bring another man into this house?" My mother's mocking laugh silenced her. "You're just a guest here. Don't forget that," Reed added cruelly. "Old lady, know your place." My heart pounded with fury, but fear pinned me to my seat. From then on, my mother's insults toward my grandmother were constant leech burden, useless. Yet my grandmother endured with quiet dignity, tending the garden and cleaning as though her patience could somehow preserve peace. But peace shattered one winter morning when snow blanketed the hill. My mother summoned my grandmother to the living room, her voice icy. "It's time for you to leave. You don't belong here anymore." I ran to the hallway, my chest tight. My grandmother stood pale but steady. "Patrick wanted me here to be with Finn," she said. My mother's cruel laughter echoed. "Patrick is dead. I decide now. Leave today or I'll have you dragged out." Reed smirked by her side, fueling the fire. I finally found my voice shouting, "Mom, don't do this. Grandma hasn't done anything wrong. This is Dad's house." My mother's eyes sliced into me. She grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise and hissed, "Shut up. Go to your room." My grandmother placed her hand on my shoulder, whispering, "Don't worry about me, Finn. Take care of yourself." Then she walked slowly to the door, where a small suitcase already waited. Through the window, I watched her frail figure drag it into the snow until she disappeared. My mother turned to Reed with a satisfied smile. Finally, this house is truly ours. I ran to my room and broke down in tears for my father, my grandmother, and myself, powerless to protect the ones I loved. That night, Julieta knocked softly on my door carrying cookies and hot chocolate. "Your grandmother is a strong woman," she told me gently. "She'll be okay. You must be strong too." I asked why my mother hated her, but Julieta only shook her head, whispering, "There are things you don't understand yet. One day everything will come to light." Her words were both a comfort and a chilling omen of what was to come. After my grandmother was cast out, the mansion no longer felt like home. It became a stage for my mother and Reed, their laughter filling the halls where silence once lived. They hosted small parties with new friends, replacing the memory of my father with their own indulgence. I hid in my room, burying myself in books, but the air grew suffocating. I missed my grandmother's gentle presence, her quiet strength, the way she made me feel less alone. One morning, as I sat alone in the kitchen, Julieta placed toast and milk before me. My mother entered dressed sharply in a black business suit, her eyes cold and commanding. "Finn, you're coming with me today. We're meeting your father's lawyer to settle the will." My heart quickened. The will, that word had hung in the air for months like a shadow. I asked softly, "Does this have anything to do with Grandma?" My mother's eyes flashed irritation. "Don't ask questions. This is adult business. Do as I say." Julieta glanced at me, her voice barely a whisper, as my mother turned away. "Be careful, Finn." The lawyer's office sat in a sleek glass building downtown. We were led to a room where Simon Adler, my father's attorney, greeted us. Stern but calm, his sharp eyes studied me for a moment before addressing my mother. "We're here to discuss Patrick Gallagher's will." My mother leaned forward, confidence radiating. "Patrick left everything to Finn and me. I need to know the steps to transfer the assets." Simon hesitated, flipping through a folder. "Mrs. Gallagher. I'm afraid there are details you're unaware of. A year before his passing, Patrick created a living trust. The will you mentioned no longer governs his estate." My mother's face drained of color. "A trust? What do you mean? Who are the beneficiaries?" Simon's steady voice carried a weight that pressed into the room. "I cannot disclose everything yet, but I can tell you the distribution is not what you expect." Patrick wanted to protect those he loved. My mother shot up from her chair, trembling with anger. "This is a joke. Patrick would never do this without telling me. I am his wife." Simon remained calm. "These are his legal wishes. Another meeting will be arranged with the relevant parties." My mother's voice turned icy as she grabbed my arm. "Come, Finn, this isn't over." The drive home was silent but tense. When we arrived, Reed was lounging with a glass of wine. "How'd it go, darling?" he asked, smirking. My mother's voice shook with fury. "Patrick set up a trust. He left everything hidden." Reed's smile faded. "Where's the money then?" My mother turned on me, her eyes blazing. "Finn, do you know anything about this?" I shook my head, terrified. "I don't, Mom. I swear." She muttered under her breath, "No one will take what's mine." That night, I lay awake, Simon's words circling in my mind. Patrick wanted to protect the people he loved. Was this trust his way of shielding Grandma and me from my mother? Did Julieta know more than she let on? The next morning, my mother announced we were going to the bank to access my father's safe deposit box. If Patrick thought he could outsmart me, he was wrong, she said, her tone sharp as steel. Reed smirked. "You'll handle it, won't you, Denise?" but I noticed the slight tremor in her hand as she reached for her purse. The bank's cold basement room echoed with silence as we presented documents to the clerk. My mother's confidence radiated as she declared herself Patrick Gallagher's wife with full rights to his box, but the clerk hesitated. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Gallagher. Access was granted to a trustee, Mr. Adler, the attorney." "Not to you." My mother froze, then erupted. "What? This is outrageous." The clerk, flustered, produced documents confirming all assets were transferred to a trust a year earlier. On the page I glimpsed words that froze me. Primary beneficiary Lucille Gallagher. My mother nearly screamed. Lucille, that old woman. She turned on me, her eyes wild. "Finn, did you know about this?" I shook my head again, though a flicker of hope sparked inside me. My father had entrusted everything to my grandmother. Perhaps he had seen through my mother long ago. My mother muttered furiously, "I'll sue. I'll turn the world upside down." Her rage felt bottomless. At home, her fury only grew. Reed urged her, "We can't let that old woman win. Do you have a plan?" My mother paced, calling her lawyer, her voice desperate. "There's a trust, and I need to know how to break it." I hid in the hallway, listening, my heart torn between fear and hope. My grandmother had promised me she wouldn't let anyone hurt me. Was this the way she would keep that promise? The next morning, the air in the house felt charged, as though something monumental was about to happen. My mother and Reed argued loudly in the living room about the trust being airtight. Then the doorbell rang. My heart raced as I opened it before Reed could. Standing there in the pale light was my grandmother, Lucille Gallagher, silver hair tied back, her eyes steady with resolve. Beside her stood Simon Adler, carrying a stack of documents. "Grandma," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. My mother's voice spat venom behind me. "What are you doing here? I told you never to come back." My grandmother stepped forward, her small frame unyielding. Simon followed. "Mrs. Gallagher," he said firmly, "we're here to clarify matters regarding the trust." My mother laughed bitterly. "This is my house." But my grandmother's calm steel voice cut through the room. "No, Denise. This house belongs to me now, the legal beneficiary of Patrick's trust." For a moment the mansion was silent, as if the walls themselves held their breath. My mother's face turned pale, her eyes darting from Simon to my grandmother, then back to the documents in his hand. Reed broke the silence with a sneer. "What nonsense is this? Denise is Patrick's wife. She's the rightful heir." Simon lifted his hand calmly. "Sir, this is not a debate. The trust is legally binding. Mrs. Lucille Gallagher is the primary beneficiary. The mansion company shares financial assets. All of it has been transferred to her. I have the paperwork right here." My mother lunged forward, her voice cracking with desperation. "You're lying. Patrick would never betray me like this. Show me those papers." Simon stepped back, holding them firmly. "Mrs. Gallagher, everything was executed properly and signed a year ago. Patrick knew what he was doing." My grandmother's voice, steady and firm, cut through my mother's rage. "Denise, this is no longer your house. It was never truly yours. Patrick left it to me because he knew where loyalty and love truly resided." My mother's knees seemed to buckle as she collapsed onto the sofa, covering her face with trembling hands. For the first time, I saw not her cold cruelty, but something closer to defeat. Reed hovered nearby, his smirk fading into unease. "Denise," he muttered, "we can fight this. We'll find a way." My grandmother faced her squarely. Patrick anticipated this. He locked the trust so tightly that no court can undo it. But I'm not here to humiliate you. I'm here to set things right. Simon placed the documents on the table and spoke firmly. "Mrs. Gallagher, you may contest this in court, but it will not succeed. I advise you to consider alternatives." My grandmother nodded, then turned to my mother with eyes filled not with vengeance, but with solemn resolve. "Denise, I am willing to give you $500,000 as a clean break. take it, start a new life, but you must leave this house today." My heart clenched. $500,000 was a fortune to most, but compared to the mansion, the company, and the vast wealth my father had built, it was a small fraction. My grandmother's offer wasn't just generosity, it was her way of drawing a final boundary, ending the conflict without dragging us all into endless battles. Simon slid a single-page agreement across the table along with a pen. "The funds will be transferred immediately after you sign. In doing so, you relinquish all claims to the estate and agree to vacate the property today." My mother stared at the paper, her lips trembling. Her eyes flicked to me, burning with a mix of anger and desperation. "Finn, after everything I've done for you, you're siding with her." Tears blurred my vision, but I shook my head. "Mom, you threw Grandma out. You never cared about Dad or her or me. I just want to do what's right." Her chest heaved, and for a moment I thought she might hurl the pen across the room, but slowly, with trembling hands, she picked it up and scratched her signature onto the page. Each stroke seemed to carve the final cracks into her carefully built facade. Simon collected the paper, nodding. "It is settled. The funds will be wired within 24 hours. Mrs. Gallagher, you have until this evening to leave." Reed, seeing the tide turn, slipped on his coat without a word and walked out. My mother, now pale and shaking, rose silently and retreated to her bedroom. The echo of the door closing behind her felt like the last line of a play finally collapsing. I turned to my grandmother, tears falling freely. She reached for my hand, her own trembling but warm. "Finn," she said softly, "I promised your father I would protect you, and now we will rebuild together." For the first time in years, I felt the mansion breathe again, no longer cold but alive, as though the soul that had been stripped from it was returning. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the Rockies, my grandmother stood on the porch with me. "This house was never meant to be a stage for deceit," she said. "Now it will be a home again. Patrick wanted that, and so do I." I looked at her, seeing not just a frail elderly woman, but the strongest person I had ever known. In that moment, I knew the darkness of my mother's reign had ended, but I also sensed the story was not finished. My father's choices, the trust, the secrets still hidden, they would shape everything yet to come. The days after my mother left were strange. The mansion felt emptier, yet for the first time in years it also felt lighter. The oppressive weight of her presence had lifted, and with my grandmother back inside its walls, the house slowly transformed into a true home. Julieta stayed on, filling the kitchen with the smell of fresh bread, and my grandmother's soft laughter returned to the halls where once only cold silence reigned. I missed my father deeply, but I felt as if his spirit lingered in every corner, guiding us forward. Still, the memory of my mother haunted me. I saw her the night she collapsed onto the sofa, weeping not from grief, but from defeat, her carefully constructed world reduced to dust. I did not hate her, but I could not forgive her either. She had evicted my grandmother, invited Reed into our home, and treated me like a pawn in her endless game. All I could do was cling to the strength my grandmother offered and try to become the person my father had hoped I would be. Years passed quickly. I finished high school and entered the University of Colorado in Boulder, choosing environmental science as my major. The decision was born from afternoons spent gardening with my grandmother, watching her tend to roses with the same care she gave to people. "The earth is our home," Finn, she would say. If you don't care for it, who will? Her words became my compass. I joined cleanup projects, volunteered with community groups, and found my place in a world that extended far beyond the mansion's walls. When I was 19, my grandmother called me into my father's study. The room smelled faintly of wood and leather, as though time had paused since his death. She sat at his desk with a small wooden box carved with oak leaves. Her hands trembled slightly as she pushed it toward me. "It's time you knew the truth," she said. "Your father left this for you." Inside were letters tied neatly with a red ribbon, my father's handwriting bold and unmistakable. My chest tightened as I untied them and began to read. Dear Finn. The first one began, If you are reading this, I am likely gone. I am sorry I could not stay longer to watch you grow. Everything I did, every decision I made was for you and Grandma. I knew your mother's heart had turned cold. I could not let her hurt you both. Tears blurred the ink as I read line after line. He explained how Julieta had told him of the cruelty my mother inflicted on my grandmother, how he had suspected for years that Denise cared more for power than for family. He confessed how painful it was to admit, yet how necessary it was to protect me and my grandmother through the trust. Do not let greed or deceit guide you, he wrote. Live with honesty, kindness, and love. I believe in you. I turned to my grandmother, overwhelmed. She nodded gently. Patrick told me of the trust before he died. He knew what Denise had become. He wanted to shield us. In the bundle, I found a final letter not addressed to me but to her. With shaking hands, she unfolded it and read aloud, tears slipping down her cheeks. Dear Mom, I know you never told me what you endured, but I saw it in my heart. Thank you for raising Finn, for being his light. I'm leaving everything to you because I trust you more than anyone. I love you. She folded it slowly, whispering, I couldn't protect him from his illness, but I will protect you, Finn. That is my promise. The letters became my anchor. Each one revealed not only the love my father carried, but also the wisdom he wanted to pass on. Through them, I came to understand that he had not abandoned us to chance. He had carefully laid a path forward, trusting my grandmother and me to walk it together. In the years that followed, I built my life with those letters as my guide. I graduated, became a lecturer, and poured myself into community projects, focusing on environmental preservation and social justice. The mansion itself became a symbol of renewal. With my grandmother's blessing, I began plans to turn it into something more than a house, something that could give back to the community that had always supported us. But even as life steadied, the shadow of my mother lingered. I had no word of her, no clue where she had gone after accepting the settlement. Part of me feared she would return one day bitter and demanding. Another part hoped she might have found peace. My grandmother never spoke ill of her. Hatred only poisons the one who carries it, she would say. I hope she finds her way, Finn. I wasn't sure if I believed that, but I wanted to. Deep down, I knew the past wasn't finished with us yet. When I turned 24, life dealt me another blow. My grandmother, who had been the pillar of strength in every storm, passed away one autumn morning. The air outside was cool, golden leaves blanketing the garden she loved so much. I found her lying peacefully in bed. Her silver hair neatly combed her face, calm as though she had merely drifted into a deeper sleep. On the nightstand lay a short handwritten note addressed to me. Dear Finn, it read, I have lived long enough to see you become a kind man. Live wisely. Do not let anyone take advantage of you. Do not blindly trust even those you love most. The mansion, the trust, all my assets are now yours. Use them to do good. Tears blurred the words as I held the note against my chest. Though I had known this day would come, I was unprepared for the emptiness it left behind. My grandmother was more than family. She was the guiding light that had carried me through every dark moment. Losing her felt like losing the sun itself. Yet her letter was also a command, a passing of responsibility. The mansion, once a theater for deceit, now belonged to me. I knew I could not let it remain merely a monument to sorrow. Inspired by my grandmother's kindness and my father's foresight, I poured the assets of the trust into creating something that would carry their legacy forward. I established the Lucille Fund, named after my grandmother, to support elderly people abandoned by their children. I wanted no one to endure what she had faced in those cruel years under my mother's roof. I transformed the mansion into the Lucille Center, a community hub where seniors found companionship, children learned about the environment, and neighbors gathered to share meals and laughter. For the first time, the house truly lived, not as a stage for appearances, but as a place of love and healing. Julieta stayed with me no longer, just a housekeeper but family. She ran the kitchen at the center, her bread and cookies becoming legendary in the neighborhood. Often in the evenings, I would sit by the fireplace with her and a group of children from the community, telling them stories of resilience and kindness, the very lessons I had inherited from my grandmother. Every time I looked around, I felt my father and grandmother close by their spirits, smiling at what had grown from their sacrifices. But even as the Lucille Center thrived, there remained a quiet absence in my heart. My mother. I had not seen or heard from her since she signed the agreement and left with her settlement. For years I wondered if she would resurface, if her ambition might drive her back to reclaim what she had lost. But she never came. Then one day word reached me through an old acquaintance. Denise Gallagher was living in a small town working as a waitress in a diner. Reed had left her once the money was gone, and she was alone, stripped of the wealth and grandeur she once worshipped. I felt no joy in hearing it, only sadness. My mother had lost everything, not just money, but the family that could have been hers had she chosen love over greed. I thought of my grandmother's words that hatred poisons only the one who carries it. I realized then that I no longer carried anger. I did not reach out, not because I could not forgive, but because forgiveness sometimes means letting go completely. She had chosen her path, and I had chosen mine. One autumn evening, standing outside the Lucille Center, I watched children chase each other under the falling leaves, their laughter echoing across the gardens. Seniors sat on benches talking softly, and Julieta waved from the doorway, flour dusting her apron. The Rocky Mountains glowed gold in the sunset. I thought of my father who had built a trust to protect me. I thought of my grandmother who had endured cruelty, yet taught me the strength of forgiveness. And I thought of my mother who had lost everything to her own ambition. In that moment I understood what life had been trying to teach me all along. It is not wealth or status that defines us, but kindness, honesty, and the courage to live with love. My grandmother's words echoed within me, "Live worthily." And for the first time, I truly felt I was. The years that followed were steady, filled with purpose and a quiet kind of joy. The Lucille Center became more than just a building. It became a symbol of what love and resilience could create out of pain. I devoted myself to teaching, lecturing in classrooms, and speaking at community gatherings, weaving my family's story into lessons about integrity, compassion, and the danger of letting ambition blind the heart. Whenever I stood before a crowd, I remembered my father's letters, his faith in me, and my grandmother's voice, reminding me that strength is not loud or cruel, but patient and enduring. Yet, even in the midst of that purpose, I sometimes thought of my mother. There were nights I lay awake wondering if she had ever looked back, if regret had softened the edges of her once hardened heart. Part of me wanted to see her, to ask why she had chosen greed over love, but I never sought her out. I understood that her absence was its own answer. Forgiveness did not require reunion, it required release. And so I released her not with bitterness, but with the hope that somewhere, somehow she might have found peace. The mansion, once a prison of appearances, now echoed with laughter and the chatter of children. In winter, the fireplaces glowed warmly, while in spring the rose gardens bloomed again, tended by volunteers inspired by my grandmother's devotion to beauty and life. I often walked the halls alone at night, remembering the boy I once was, the boy too afraid to defend his grandmother, too small to fight his mother's cruelty. I wished I could tell that boy that one day he would find the courage to stand tall, that he would transform sorrow into something radiant and lasting. On one quiet evening, as the sun painted the Rockies gold, I stood on the porch and whispered into the breeze, "Dad, Grandma, I hope you're proud." In that moment I felt them with me, not as shadows of the past, but as guiding lights still shaping my present. My father had taught me to seek wisdom and love even when tired. My grandmother had shown me that endurance and forgiveness are not weakness, but the greatest strengths a soul can hold. And even my mother in her downfall had given me a lesson that greed strips everything, leaving only emptiness behind. Life, I realized, is not about building facades or chasing wealth. It is about living with honesty, caring for others, and leaving behind more kindness than you found. My father's trust and my grandmother's sacrifices had given me the chance to live that truth, and it became my mission to honor them with every choice I made. Now, when I watch seniors find comfort at the center, or when children plant saplings in the garden with eager hands, I feel as though my family's legacy is alive in each of them. The mansion no longer belongs to deception, it belongs to love. And so do I. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it touched your heart, I ask you to like, share, and subscribe so more people can hear stories of resilience and love. Leave a comment below about what lesson spoke to you most. I would love to hear your thoughts and connect with you. Together we can carry these lessons forward and create light where once there was only shadow.